Hello, I'm Esther Gitu-Ewart. Welcome to Africa 54. Here's what's coming up. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken returns to the Middle East in yet another push for a ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war as Israel frees 4 hostages but allegedly kills hundreds of Palestinians in a weekend Gaza raid. At least 80 people in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo have been killed by jihadists allied to the Islamic State in less than a week. And over 7% of adults in the United States identify as something other than heterosexual, and the 2 presidential candidates are hoping to get their votes. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is headed to Israel Monday after meeting with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi in Cairo. Blinken is urging leaders in the region to press Hamas to say yes to a ceasefire proposal to halt fighting in Gaza. Blinken says Hamas was the only outlier in not accepting the proposal for a 3-phase deal involving the release of hostages and talks toward an end to fighting, which he says Israel has agreed. Meanwhile, Israel freed 4 hostages over the weekend in a raid on a refugee camp in Gaza. The Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry says Israeli forces killed at least 274 Palestinians in the operation. VOA's Arash Arbasadi has more.
The Israel Defense Forces released a video claiming to show the freeing of hostages kidnapped by Hamas in the October 7th terror attacks. VOA cannot independently verify this or other IDF footage. It was the largest hostage recovery operation since the beginning of the war late last year. As a freed hostage arrived at a medical facility in Tel Aviv, people sang in Hebrew, "The people of Israel are alive." It's a stark contrast to the Nuseirat refugee camp in Gaza, where the Israeli operation left more than 270 Palestinians dead, according to the Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry. That included airstrikes that leveled parts of the camp just days after Israeli troops pummeled a school-turned-shelter, according to local health officials.
The tragedy of civilians being caught up in this is precisely because of how Hamas is battling us on the battleground. Our responsibility, our first and foremost responsibility, is to rescue the hostages, to bring them home, to create a better security situation for Israelis, and I would say for Palestinians alike.
As the Israel Defense Forces continue sweeps in Gaza, claiming to seize stockpiles of weapons, its staunchest ally, the United States, says this conflict could end right now if Hamas agreed to a ceasefire.
That point, we believe, needs to be reinforced by the entire international community, because if Hamas came and said yes to the deal on the table, there would be an end to the need for these kinds of operations because the hostages would be coming out peacefully and not through military action.
Israel's war on Hamas began after the October 7 attack on Israel that killed 1,200 people. According to the Gaza Health Ministry, Israeli forces killed more than 37,000 Palestinians in the conflict. Meanwhile, weekly protests of the government of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu continued, with people calling for elections to replace him and a deal to release the remaining hostages. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is set to visit the region this week for another attempt at brokering a ceasefire to bring an end to the conflict. Arash Arbasadi, VOA News.
The United Nations Security Council is scheduled to vote Monday on a U.S.-drafted resolution backing a proposal outlined by President Joe Biden for a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. A resolution needs at least 9 votes in favor and no vetoes by the U.S., France, Britain, China, or Russia to pass. In developing news, Malawi's president and cabinet says a military plane carrying Vice President Saulos Klaus Chilema did not arrive as scheduled earlier Monday at the Mzuzu International Airport in northern Malawi. The president's office says efforts to contact the aircraft have failed. President Lazarus Chakwera is canceling plans to leave for the Bahamas and ordered all regional and national organizations to immediately search for the plane. VOAAfrica.com will have updates on this story as it develops. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, the allied democratic forces who have pledged allegiance to Islamic State is believed to be behind a series of recent attacks in North Kivu province. Jihadist rebels are suspected to have killed more than 80 people in Congo in less than a week, according to an army spokesman who says the death toll from an attack on Friday has risen to at least 40. Lieutenant Colonel Mark Hazuki says the ADF is responsible for the deaths in the villages of Masala, Mapasana and Mahini. European Union Foreign Affairs spokeswoman Nabila Masrali says the terrorist group are seizing the opportunity of chaos to expand their grip on an already unstable region. Reporter Zanem Neti Zaid has more on the Congo killings from Goma.
On Monday, the 10th of June, the government announced that 41 people had been killed by Islamist rebels of the allied democratic forces over the weekend in two localities in the Beni territory in the province of North Kivu. The government's figure is far lower than several others reported by local sources and chiefs who put the death toll at more than 70. On Sunday, a team from the military prosecutor's office went to the scene to assess the situation and understand the facts. The search is continuing for other bodies of civilians who have yet to be found. The population is calling on the Congolese government to step up security in the region to prevent further attacks, while the government is reassuring that action is already being taken to put the rebels out of action.
That was Zanem Neti Zaid reporting from Goma. A violent clash over the weekend between two clans in central Somalia has killed at least 55 people and injured another 155, according to residents and medical officials. Somalia's federal government is not only struggling to contain violence unleashed by the al-Qaeda-linked Al-Shabaab group, but is also facing clan-based clashes over control of land and water. The fighting between the Dir and Marihan clans erupted Saturday over grazing land and water points. Following Kenyan President William Ruto's state visit to the White House, Ronald Osumba, senior political advisor Africa at the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change, is set to address the shifting geopolitical relations between Kenya and the U.S., even as Russia and China pursue various interests on the continent. And for more insight on the high-profile visit, I'm joined live from Nairobi by Mr. Osumba. Mr. Osumba, please tell us tell our viewers what does President Ruto's visit to the White House mean for Kenyans, and are they beginning to see the deliverables of this high-profile visit?
Thank you very much, Esther, for having me. Indeed, this has been a significant visit, not just for Kenya, but for the entire continent of Africa, in the sense that this is part of the culmination of the relationship that Africa has with the U.S. You will remember that this strategic partnership between Kenya and the U.S. actually kicked off in 2018 between President Trump and President Kenyatta. And in 2022, the U.S. Launched its new reframed strategic partnership with Africa. So really, President Ruto's visit, I think, is just a climax of what has already been happening. Have Kenyans started feeling the impact? Maybe not. A lot of this bilateral agreements usually would take a couple of months, maybe a year or two, before you begin to feel the impact. What is instructive, however, is that the assistant U.S. representative for trade is already in Kenya, and the whole of last week, her delegation and the delegation led by Minister of Trade in Kenya have been negotiating. It is part of the 2018 Strategic Trade and Investments Partnership negotiations, but I think we are really more into it as having been timed perfectly to come after the visit so that they can really be able to get into the details of it.
Now, prior to his visit to the White House, he was in Atlanta. He spent a couple of days there speaking to Kenyans in the diaspora there, as well as, officials in Atlanta. And the question is whether that kind of engagement he had there is expected to translate into some economic benefits for the people of Kenya.
Yeah, very good observation, Esther. I think the Atlanta visit was very strategically crafted and curated between the two parties. You will remember that it is in Atlanta that one of Kenya's women-founded and women-led companies in the textile and clothing industry was launched a shop in Atlanta. It is in Atlanta that the big deal with Coca-Cola in terms of expansion of its operations, production for the region based in Kenya was also announced. It was also instructive to note that President Ruto visited Tyler Perry Studios. And we know, the creative economy is now a big driver with youth employment in Kenya and in the region. So it is indeed, I think, instructive, very well curated. We will see the huge African diaspora in Atlanta get engaged in a lot of this.
Ronald, if I could give you 30 seconds, how do you think his White House visit might impact the Russia-China influence that's already in Kenya and Africa very quickly?
I mean, the U.S. already has a bit of a headache with the Sahel. We've already seen Secretary Blinken pull out 1,000 of its troops from Niger. We will continue to see a lot of this kind of challenges for the U.S., particularly as Russia and even Turkey, by the way, move into coming up with security contracts for that particular region. As for China, China has been moving away from checkbook diplomacy, and I think the U.S. is really just now trying to catch up with China to be able to have more strategic investments in trade and in green energy.
Right. Thank you so much, Ronald. We will pursue this at another time. Ronald Osumba is a Senior Political Advisor, Africa, at the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change. The number of adults in the United States identifying as something other than heterosexual is holding steady at about 7.2%, and the two presidential candidates are taking note. VOA Senior Washington correspondent Caroline Persutti tells us how they are trying to attract that population.
Gallup estimates that a little more than 7% of American adults are lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or questioning their sexuality, known as LGBTQ. That group protested a 2017 Twitter announcement by then-President Donald Trump that barred transgender people from serving in the military. Less than a week into his presidency, Joe Biden overturned the ban.
Transgender personnel, if qualified in every other way, can serve their government in the United States military.
It is quite a relief to have an administration that understands who we are and values us as American citizens.
Also during his term, President Joe Biden signed the Respect for Marriage Act, which gave federal rights and benefits to same-sex couples. Here's what he said to the LGBTQ community during a White House event.
You are loved. You are heard. You are understood. And you belong.
As a gay man, a lot of my rights with the other parties can be in jeopardy. So part of the reason why I do support Biden, not this term, and I did support him last term as well, was because of what he stands for.
Former President Donald Trump was the first president to appoint an openly gay cabinet official, but he has taken an overall more conservative stance. He has said God created two genders, male and female.
What is with pronouns? If you really study it and look at it, it's sick. It's sick. I will protect the content that is pro-God. We're going to protect pro-God context and content.
It's a narrative that his voters stand behind.
The Republicans sidelines more so with what the Bible says in terms of eliminating abortion in terms of getting rid of the LGBTQ.
President Biden has condemned conservative state laws restricting gender-affirming surgery and classes on sexual orientation. Former President Trump promised this on his campaign website.
On day one, I will revoke Joe Biden's cruel policies on so-called gender-affirming care. Ridiculous. A process that includes giving kids puberty blockers, mutating their physical appearance, and ultimately performing surgery on minor children.
A Democratic advisor says this is the traditional Republican Party that Republican voters want.
They're anti-immigrant, they're anti-transgender, they're anti-gay, and Trump knew that. He took that, he held on to it.
These voters helped Biden win swing states in 2020. A poll by the advocacy group GLAAD shows the same strong support for Biden, but they overwhelmingly urge the Republican Party to focus on the economy rather than restricting their rights. Carolyn Persutti, VOA News.
Still to come, a South African gay choir is known for its role in LGBTQI advocacy. We'll be right back.
Health, wellness, sport, beauty, medical breakthroughs. Healthy Living cares about your well-being. What are the main health concerns in Africa and around the world? Find out the latest on coronavirus. Connect with our experts and ask them questions.
How long does the virus stay?
Join me, Lina Khmoudou, in Washington, every week on Healthy Living, right here on VOA.
In other news, Sudan's Rapid Support Forces paramilitary group fired shots and looted a health facility in the western region of Darfur, forcing its closure, according to Doctors Without Borders. The aid group says the RSF attacked the South Hospital in Al-Fasher in North Darfur province on Sunday. Most patients and the medical team managed to flee the shooting. It was not immediately clear if there were casualties. Russia is emerging as the security partner of choice for a growing number of African governments in the region, displacing traditional allies like France and the United States. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov recently stopped in Guinea, the Republic of Congo, Burkina Faso, and Chad as Moscow seeks to grow its influence in this mineral-rich section of the continent. U.S. presidential candidates, incumbent Democrat Joe Biden and Republican Donald Trump, have very different views on the production of fossil fuels and the need to transition to clean energy to fight climate change. VOA's Veronica Balderas Iglesias looks at where each candidate stands and the agendas they will champion if re-elected.
During his time in office, President Joe Biden has made his views on climate change clear.
My administration, the United States, has treated this crisis as an existential threat from the moment we took office, not only for us, but for all of humanity.
Biden has expanded energy options, including solar and wind power. He has also put limits on oil and gas development on federal lands. Environmental advocates want more.
Apart from just climate change, we have very rare birds and species across the American West, which are deeply impacted by this drilling. Simply ramping up clean energy is not going to do enough without actually phasing down fossil fuels as well.
If Biden wants the green vote in November, he'll need to make more changes, Reese says.
It's critical that he take action to show that he's actually willing to confront fossil fuels, because that is what will actually incite environmentalists. That is what will actually get them from perhaps reluctantly voting for him in November to actively recruiting their friends, turning out, knocking on doors.
Former President Donald Trump has a radically different agenda for his possible return to the White House.
We're going to drill, baby, drill right away. Jill, baby Jill.
The U.S. Senate Finance and Budget Committees are investigating an offer that Trump reportedly made to oil companies, saying that if he receives $1 billion in campaign donations, he will roll back climate change regulations if he's elected U.S. president. What is certain is that the oil and gas industry thrived under the Trump administration, says Kathleen Skama, president of the nonprofit Western Energy Alliance.
President Trump championed domestic oil and natural gas and tried to make the United States an energy superpower. And we have achieved that status.
But despite the energy industry's criticism of Biden, Skama says it will work with whoever wins the White House.
We would hope that the Biden administration would, if reelected, would have overregulated as much as it could in the first term, and that would maybe take a step back in the second. With the Trump administration, we would hope some of this would be overturned.
Analysts expect the election results to have a domestic and global impact, as it could affect the U.S. role as a climate leader. Verónica Valderas Iglesias, VOA News, Washington.
In cities worldwide, Chinatowns are recognizable either by their big red gates or streets lined with Chinese restaurants and stores. In Nairobi, Kenya, there are several Chinatowns of different sizes scattered around the city. VOA Nairobi Bureau Chief Mariama Diallo took a stroll in one of them and has this story.
From caramel sunflower seeds to Chinese instant noodles, the Feng Cheng supermarket has a wide variety of products.
This supermarket is not only for Chinese, for any people.
This market is in one of the mini Chinatowns in Nairobi. Located in the Kilimani neighborhood, it's about 5 kilometers west of the city's central business district. Owner and former doctor Liu Fengchen opened this market 6 years ago. Originally from China, he came to Kenya 3 decades ago. He married a Kenyan and they have 2 children. Chan says he became an entrepreneur because he saw a business opportunity here.
I check from 30 years ago up to now, is the Chinese, there comes some more than before.
The modern-day wave of migration from China to Kenya took off during the administration of late President Mwai Kibaki, says Nairobi University's Kenneth Ambongi.
Kibaki sort of formulated a foreign policy that was anchored around what we call positive engagement in diplomacy, which was, if we have danced to the tune of the West all this long, and we have not been able to move as fast as we wanted to move development-wise, why can't we try the East?
Like many African countries, Kenya has green-lighted massive Chinese-built infrastructure, including highways and railroads. They are part of Chinese leader Xi Jinping's Belt and Road Initiative, a multi-billion-dollar vision aimed to promote trade and investment by connecting China to the world through infrastructure projects. Along with more Chinese workers connected to these projects are businesses that cater to them.
We provide soup, a pot of soup, beef soup, to be precise. You cook by yourself, so we have a variety of things. There's different kinds of meats.
General Manager Stephen Obado says he's been working at the Hot Pot Train restaurant in Chinatown since it opened in January.
Majority of our customers are Asians, but we also have local customers. So Chinese people and Thailand people, those are the majority of the people we get here.
Bonnie Howe, originally from Shanghai, recently moved to Kenya from Uganda for work 6 months ago. She's been a regular visitor here.
By eating the hot pot, it can make me missing my homeland. Maybe I'm going to for shopping. Some Chinese will use some special things, like the vegetable is different from local.
Fresh faces mean more business for Liu Fengchen. Between the Chinese and local customers, plus the years he's been living here, he's learned to embrace Kenyan culture and even picked up a little Swahili. Mariama Diallo, VOA News, Nairobi.
The artists from South Africa's Mzansi Gay Choir, known not just for their music but also for their role in the LGBTQI advocacy. Isan Hafji reports from Johannesburg.
Tammy Dish co-founded the Mzansi Gay Choir in 2016. Part of its mission was to inspire inclusivity and diversity and showcase the true essence of the LGBTQI community through music.
We found a great bunch of humans who were keen on journeying with us in becoming some voice of change through the arts and that discipline of music.
The choir has performed countless sold-out shows and has been appearing regularly on the hit TV show Idols SA. Sishle Mazibuko says all choir members embrace the dual roles of musician and activist.
Taking a stance and doing so through music and performance in the way that the choir does, it's actually a campaign that's speaking to the injustices done to the LGBTQIA+ community, not only in Africa but globally, I think.
The choir not only lends its voice to amplify issues around gay rights, but also serves as a safe space for its members. Olivia Magubani recalls the difficulties of growing up queer in a strictly religious family and how the choir has helped.
It has helped me live free, in a world full of, people that don't understand us, people that don't get us. The Mzansi Gay Choir is truly my safe space.
South Africa's constitution prohibits discrimination on the grounds of sexual orientation, but homosexuality is illegal in most countries in Africa. And Dish says the choir's existence comes with the responsibility of bringing hope to marginalized queer people on the continent.
But what I think we do have as a country is a choir that wants to be able to send a message to whether you're Ugandan, Tanzanian, you're in Ghana, you're in Congo, you're in Nigeria, you're in Malawi, Zimbabwe, Cameroon, you name them. There's a sense of hope that we're giving to queer individuals there.
As the artists of Mzansi Gay Choir continue to build on their musical success, they are equally determined to advocate for a more just and equitable world. Isan Hafji, VOA News, Johannesburg, South Africa.
That's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thank you for watching.